Oh, good to see you back too. And straight ahead or across, I've got Advocate Danston Omari, who's also a resident analyst with this very show. How are you, sir?
Fantastic and nice to see you back after short
sabbatical.
Yes.
And I can see you got the memo of the red tie.
Yeah,
welcome to the program. So last week we saw lawyers, fellow learned friends, go to the ballot to elect their leaders, those that will head the Law Society of Kenya. It's only right and prudent we begin this show at that note, because we are all lawyers on this set, and I'd like to begin with you, Mamboleo. Your take on the LSK elections.
I am a very proud member of the Law Society of Kenya, and in spite of what normally goes out there as fights for this or the other about the Law Society, we still think that it's a society that is headed in the right direction. Let me say something very important about the Law Society of Kenya. You know, the Law Society of Kenya is a professional body, which is established for the purposes of advancing the interests and regulating, to some extent, the conduct of advocates. I am sure when I speak about this, I want to imagine that the public understands the difference between lawyers and advocates. Advocates are lawyers who have been entered in a role of advocates, which is maintained by a division in the Chief Justice's office, and it enables them to do certain things which lawyers who haven't been admitted to the bar cannot do. So there is something extremely important about the Law Society, which probably the Law Society needs to start discussing going forward. The Law Society of Kenya is created by an act of parliament, okay? And there are those of us who view this is an impediment to the progress of the Law Society of Kenya itself. And I'm one of those who are of the view that going forward, we probably need to think about a law society, a professional body, which is regulated by its own constitution and rules. Just like any other professional body, the way it happens everywhere else. As opposed to just because it is a lawyer's professional body, that it must be enacted by an act of parliament. The reason why this is important is this. There are certain aspects of the law society which have become very difficult even to change because of the fact that it is created by an act of parliament. And so every time we might need some change in that particular act, you can never be sure that parliament will move so quick to actually enact those changes, which means that there is a possibility that in the turn of the 21st century, the Law Society of Kenya could be conducting its affairs on the basis of an act of parliament which was created many years ago. The second thing, and which is extremely also important, is that, you know, by virtue of the fact that it is created by an act of parliament, it allows the membership very little. For instance, you can see right now that there is a problem on how to create branches. There is a problem on representation because the act requires a certain number of years. You know the famous problem with Nelson Harvey and how he was barred from running because the society requires a certain number of years in practice for someone to become president, which is wrong for me because that is discrimination. If a gentleman at 1 year, 2 years of practice can convince the rest of the membership that he is fit to be the president of the Law Society of Kenya, let that be so. So I know there are many issues with the Law Society of Kenya, and we hope that the new team headed now by the President, Alan Gishui, will take up those issues. But I want to suggest that probably the first place to start is by retrieving or recovering the Law Society of Kenya from Parliament and bringing it to the membership so that the membership have total control on what happens. All those other aspects in the Law Society of Kenya Act which require or which are there for regulation can be taken to the Advocates Act, which is the parent act guiding advocates.
Over to you, Milly.
Yes, I think that the beauty is that we were all able to vote for those who are interested in voting. I think it was unfortunate that not too many decided to turn out because of, well, the apathy that is there. And for me, that's where I would like to begin. that it is important, I think, for the Law Society of Kenya to get leadership that excites not just the membership but the nation. We had it, I think, up to the last I can remember was when Mutua was president, you know, when you constantly engage with issues that touch wananchi, trying to give that spin. I remember just before we went into elections last year, there was this concern that all lawyers were appearing and they are all saying different things and they are all saying the law is clear. We did not seem to get the Law Society's voice being heard there, because then it would have been easier to say, well, your society says this. Is it more likely to be what the law means or not, you know? So that kind of voice, or engaging in issues that people would think that ideally these are not issues that should concern us. And I say this, for example, in even in issues of distribution of offices, whether it's according to the law or not, and etc. But the saddest part for me is that even within the Law Society, this profession that is seen to be having pretty learned people and pretty vocal people, that even there, because of the kind of elections we have, you find that women are shy of going for the top seat. So that we had quite a number vying for every other position except that. And it is unfortunate that what was key to members of the public was not really highlighted. Focus was left on who is going to be the president, and then until they started trying to mar the name of some of the other seats. But there's the disciplinary committee, which is very relevant to wananchi engaging with the lawyers, that we were also voting for. But nobody was talking about who is coming to that disciplinary committee, so that people could be analyzing and could be engaging, and wananchi would understand that when I am going to hire a lawyer and I'm going to have a problem, because they always have problems with us, that this is at the point when they're also electing this disciplinary committee. So again, it's important for us to have a kind of public debate, you know, that does not focus so much on one seat for one reason, but on what the entire body is meant to do, I think, for wananchi.
For wananchi. Yes. Over to you, Omari.
Thank you very much. I want first to congratulate the president. You know, people have their own presidents on the street. Others have their presidents at State House. As lawyers, we have our president at Gitanga Road, called Allen Gishui, the Law Society of Kenya president. His vice president, Councillor Harriet Chigai, and the whole council, the 13 members who form the council of Law Society of Kenya. That was fantastic. Number two, I want to thank the IBC for conducting a fair, credible, transparent election, that the results have not been disputed. All the people are satisfied. Thirdly, all the competitors, it was a big battle. It was a big battle. It attracted quite a number of councils, advocates. They conceded defeat in a fair game, and I think the national political body should be looking at how lawyers conduct their elections. Lastly, I want to thank all the voters, the members of the Law Society, who turned up, voted, who campaigned. It was a vicious campaign, a tough political contest, but at the end of the day, the members' voice was loud and clear. Let me look at critical issues about the Law Society of Kenya. One, the Law Society of Kenya has a mandate to protect the rule of law, but it does not need to turn itself into a political opposition party. That is what I'm addressing the council, that they are supposed to provide the true position of the law. For example, during the electioneering time, the Law Society's point of law was never heard. The only time the Law Society's point of law came out very clear was at the Maraga 1, that is Raila 1, election petition, when LSK's position was put there. So we will expect that the Law Society of Kenya must always give the true position of its members' point of view. Each individual lawyer will defend a position based on who is the client he is representing. But the Law Society of Kenya has a mandate, a statutory mandate, to provide that direction, so that the citizens know that the true position is this. Number two, We are heading when the Law Society of Kenya is coming into force, the leadership, when there is a complete anarchy in form of complying with the court orders, in form of complying with the directives coming from the court. We expect the Law Society of Kenya to address that issue and inform the public the role of court orders and the role to obey that is. And also we expect the Law Society of Kenya Council to move away from being seen to belong to one political formation. The other council that will exit officially on the 24th of March, when we have the annual general meeting, appeared to be divided equally on NASA and Jubilee. We expect Allen and Group to bring together the Law Society of Kenya to speak with one voice. We expect the Secretariat, led by the able counsel, Mercy Wambua, to do for us that which the law provides for her to do. Away from that, will the political class that is interested for the elections of 2022 avoid from meddling, avoid from being attracted to the issues of LSK? Council members, be alert that the political formation is looking at how they will infiltrate the Law Society of Kenya. But solace is something that the council will only serve for 2 years.
2 years, yeah.
2018, 2019. In February 2020, we'll have a new council. That is the new council that will go towards the elections of 2022. Will those elections, national elections of 2022, will not be superintended by these elected members of LSK. But the formation towards 2022 has already started. So we are urging the council members to avoid the pitfalls of us being dragged into unnecessary battles, unnecessary political battles that are forming.
Right, and moving on from that issue is, I'd like us to put a political issue into perspective, one that has been happening over the weekend. And I would like to begin by echoing the words of one Raila Odinga. And he says, I quote, "I hear people saying Wiper is fighting with ODM, ANC, and Ford Kenya. We are like a normal home settling where disputes are bound to happen. That doesn't mean NASA is crumbling. I mean, even in the institution of marriage, those who have a wife will tell you it's not happiness every day." Well, I don't have a wife yet, but let me get the perspective of my analyst in studio this morning. Mamboleo, beginning with you. Is this a make or break for NASA?
Well, at least I have a wife, Sammy. And I am therefore qualified to speak on that particular question.
Mm-hmm.
Raila Amolo Odinga is a man who has fought in the trenches for many years. In the recent years, he is famous for changing his political alliances every so often, depending on the need of the time. And I know that in the run-up towards the 2017 election, it was apt for him to craft something which, a special purpose vehicle, which would garner for the presidency of the Republic of Kenya in the last election. Now, Raila Odinga has played an important role in the democratization process of this country. He's one of those who's fought seriously and consistently so for the expansion of the democratic space of the country, and much credit, of course, goes to him. The other important thing I think about Raila Odinga is that he has also created certain people. For instance, it's an open secret that somebody like Musalia Mudavadi was actually going down. His name had completely fizzled into political oblivion in the period 2013-2017. And then Raila Odinga came along and pulled him from the political oblivion, and he made him something. In fact, for some time, Musalia Mudavadi began to look like he might amount to something in Kenyan politics. And then there is, of course, the quintessential vintage Kalonzo. I don't want to call him the names that a lot of people call him, But I want to say that, you know, this is a man who in 2007 would have made the whole difference. He would have decided to join one Milly Lwanga Kibaki, and Kibaki would have won definitively. Or he could have joined Raila Odinga, and Raila Odinga would have won the race definitively. I'm sure that would have, you know, we have conducted a commission which has inquired about that election, and it said that nobody knows who won that election. So I believe strongly that if there was a time that Kenya needed Kalonzo, it was in 2007. And now Kalonzo, the guilty man, knowing how he betrayed Raila Odinga in 2007, has been trying to do certain things to appease Raila Odinga and assuage his own sense of guilt. What I could call too little, too late. Let me come to the present woes of NASA. NASA is dead. And NASA is dead for the simple reason that NASA was not meant to survive in the first place. And since what it was created for was to seize state power, and it did not manage, it was going to definitely die a natural death. However, there is this small question of the oathing that took place. Was it on the 30th?
Yeah.
Raila Odinga took an oath, okay? We knew that in the run-up towards the 30th, the coalition had not agreed on how this oath was going to happen. Of course, we know that Musalia Mudavadi, Moses Wetangula, and Kalonzo were actively against the idea of that oath. And one Raila Odinga, who has run this political landscape like a colossus for many years, understood only one thing, that even if this oathing is only ceremonial and it is for some unconstitutional, actually it could be illegal. If my partners in the coalition have been telling me and telling the public that, you know, they are going to attend the swearing in and even be sworn together with me, if they refuse to come, this is going to give me a very good opportunity to release myself from any political arrangement that I've had with these people. And this is where I support Raila Odinga. In fact, today, if I were Raila Odinga, the phone call that I cannot pick is from one Kalonzo Musyoka. I'm not going to pick any phone calls from Musalia Mudavadi or from Moses Wetangula. And you know what we have right now is a situation in which that MOU, that fickle MOU that had brought NASA together, has been broken, has been shattered into pieces. There is no longer any MOU that binds these people. Now, each and every of these people is on their own, and each of them will go back to their political oblivion, as I am sure Raila Odinga starts crafting another special purpose vehicle for 2022. In fact, what you see out here right now, as an opposition to government, and I've warned government many times, don't sit pretty and think that NASA is crumbling. NASA is actually reorganizing in a different form. They are playing the role of the opposition in an unconventional manner. And you should be innovative and careful enough to know that this is now the manifestation of the opposition. It is not an opposition dying. It is an opposition that is manifesting itself in a different manner. And so what you're going to see in the coming days is everybody will go their own separate ways. And as usual, Raila Odinga, the person that a lot of people had written off and said that he was shooting his last bullet, is now going to reemerge again with a different outfit. And don't get surprised that you will see the kind of alliances that you have not seen before. But one thing for sure, which you can now take to the bank, is that that day that Moses Mudavadi, Wetangula and Kalonzo refused to appear at Uhuru Park together, they gave this man called Raila Odinga another card that he's going to play in the coming days. And for all intents and purposes, unless something drastic happens, I can tell you for sure, even that small constituency that Kalonzo Musyoka and Musalia Mudavadi and Wetangula used to have is now gone.
is now gone. I'd like to come to you, Milly, because also last week and a little bit of the week before, we saw a lot of back and forth when it came to appointment of members to the Parliamentary Service Commission. And essentially, we saw this around NASA. And there was insistence, especially by John Badi, saying that we are sponsoring or we are giving these names as NASA. But then there are pundits who would argue and say, no single candidate was sponsored by the coalition called NASA. They were individual parties.
Yes.
So let us just forge a way forward, clearly speaking, about this coalition. What are their opportunities? What are their liabilities moving forward from this situation?
Yes, I think that the beauty with reading things from a removed perspective is that you can see people getting into the same pitfalls that they have gone into before. And I say this from this perspective. There's a time when people would go and have civic education or political engagement outside Nairobi, which was then the capital city, still is, and was the only known town. And there was this perspective that when you went to the village or to the rural area, that people wanted to know what is Nairobi saying, so that it would guide their thinking. And consistently, people continued to do their politicking and their governance in that way, trying to bring this approach that we have the answers, we have the knowledge, until they realized that it was actually an anomaly, because most of our fathers who had gone to school, worked in Nairobi, had this political, were the ones in the village. So there was nothing you're going to tell them there. Now I say this because NASA, as I see it, does not belong to the leaders. The leaders belong to NASA. And I say this why? Because the people have actively engaged in the agenda that NASA has been selling. The masses have actually bought into that agenda and therefore choose you to articulate the agendas. If you fail to articulate the agenda, they remain solidly united and will pick the next person. And we've seen this happen before. Even the NASA leader, Honorable Raila, when he was not sworn in the first time, he had to go out and explain to the people why he was not sworn in. And it was so consistent that everywhere, including in Machakos, where he says he got the most Bibles, people would give him Bibles and say, if it is this Bible that you don't have, can you go and be sworn in? We have seen the backlash that is hitting Kalonzo, now that he failed as the running mate to be sworn in on 30th, after that, from the people. And he's responding and trying to react to what he knows the masses are feeling about his failure to attend. Now, why am I saying this? I'm saying this because when you look at the opportunities that the leadership within NASA have, is to simply remain true to the agenda of the people. If you remain true to the agenda of the people, it doesn't matter who comes up there. The people will build him. We have seen somebody like Miguna, who got, I can't remember how many votes in Nairobi, whose campaign was seen to be a joke. I remember people saying his campaign was from Nation House to, I don't know, KBC to Standard, you know.
Was very,
the media, basically the media, and people making fun of that. Becoming a person that the entire country is talking about and is concerned about, as though he had been number 2 in the gubernatorial race in Nairobi, or a disputed number 2 for that matter. And this is simply because of what the masses feel. So you cannot ignore the masses going forward. You cannot ignore the fact that people have realized where they think that we have gone wrong as a country, and therefore they need that agenda articulated. And that is where I agree completely with Mamboleo's statement, that the beauty that Honorable Raila has is that he reads the mood of the people. And that is why even now the discussions cannot begin unless first the key concern of the people is put on the table. Then anything else can become a secondary agenda. And that's something that we have to remain alive to, including Jubilee, being alive to that, because insistent and persistent comment or targeting of individuals thinking that that will scuttle the NASA agenda is wasted effort.
Let's talk about political capital, because then this whole situation, the silver lining is that the emergence, and very strongly so, of Ali Hassan Joho is very evident. Who then brings in political capital that will help NASA survive? You to compare Joho, Wetangula, Musalia Mudavadi, and Kalonzo Musyoka.
When you look at the formations and the happenings in NASA, you put Jubilee at the center of it. And specifically, you put the Deputy President, William Ruto, at the nerve center of what is happening. This is the succession for 2022. It's not about NASA. It's about 2022. My first point is that NASA died, courtesy of one Chief Justice Maraga. NASA went to the elections knowing that they are winning. NASA lost. They went to court. They never anticipated that the elections of President Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto will be nullified. Maraga gave them what they could not be able to manage. How to deal with an election that has been nullified was a bombshell. So what we are seeing now is the ripple effect of them going to court. Had they not gone to court, NASA could be intact now. That they went to court, that thing was a tsunami to them. So they don't know how to behave from that day. Number two, NASA collapsed. Immediately they said they are not going for the rerun of 2016 on the 26th of October. It is them who prayed for it. They were given it. They didn't know how to deal with it. So therefore they collapsed. Third, the final nail on NASA came when they went for swearing in. What my good friend Mamboleo has told you, that was suicidal. It is political statement, but it is political suicidal. So in my own view, the fact that Raila Odinga was sworn in, with an anticipation of a shrewd politician on how to disengage from other coalition partners, is not going to save him. The boat has left. Why do I say this? The master of the Kenyan politics changed from one Raila Odinga to one William Ruto. In June of 2017, around March 2017, William Ruto did what nobody could see and could imagine had a long-term effect. Closing shop of URP and forming one party called Jubilee. It looked a very miscalculated approach. We are seeing the dividends now. So William Ruto realized that the nation as it is, you cannot have a coalition. You must have one political party. What Raila Odinga you have just read is saying now, we either have got to be in a coalition or we must be prepared to work together. Mbadi and the others have put it very clearly that we need to strengthen ODM. Joho has come out with capital in saying, forget about issues of coalitions. Let us fight and develop a party called ODM. Raila Odinga in the meetings, he has always, you've never seen Raila Odinga of late wearing those attires of NASA. He walks to meetings with ODM attires.
Very orange. Very orange.
So what we are likely to see is the collapse of the pretenders to have political capital. The pretenders are three. Kalonzo Musyoka pretends that he has a constituency. One Moses Mudavadi pretends that he has a constituency. And Wetangula. Now it is time for Raila Odinga versus William Ruto. In two formations, ODM and Jubilee. Whatever, whether it will be Jubilee for William Ruto or a new entity, it will be a race between two horses. And the horses have already shown who they are, William Ruto and there might be a third horse in 2022.
We're already talking about horses. Okay.
There might be a third horse in 2022. If Mount Kenya region bolts out from William Ruto's stable, that bloc might also be a very serious contender for 2022. Okay. So, in my own view, William Ruto is already getting all over. And who said he might absorb all these guys? Either Raila Odinga might be supporting William Ruto in 2022. The three have no option. Wetangula, Kalonzo, and Mudavadi, they have written their political obituary. Then they will not be anywhere. I think nobody even might be looking for them to join them because their constituency has totally been destroyed. So William Ruto strategically is going to grab the constituencies of these people. Raila Odinga believes that Western Province, he does not need the two brothers from Western to get inroads. He only needs Atwoli to get the vote of Western Kenya. So I'm likely to see scenarios changing, and within the next, by June, William Ruto and Raila Odinga will either be working together. Sami, I know you were not here when Raila Odinga spoke in Bomet and said, William Ruto, you know, go slow. I might be the only guy who will give you power. Will Raila Odinga be William Ruto's running mate so that Raila Odinga retires and goes to the political obituary as a deputy president? He cannot make it as a president of this country. Is he realizing that the only way also for him to troop back to power is through by supporting William Ruto?
Well, is he better off as a deputy or is he better off as a kingmaker?
That's a good question.
The kingmakers are normally made, they make kings the same day the king is sworn, they are thrown out.
Let me see. Mamboleo, is he better as a deputy or as a kingmaker?
This is what I think, this is what is going on right now in Raila Odinga's mind. I have contested the presidency of this republic for many years, all right? I have not managed to become president.
Yes.
I have mobilized in ways that you can never imagine. And still, that house on the hill becomes very elusive all the time. So what is this that I am not doing right? And his immense political experience is now showing him that, you know, when you want to collaborate politically, you have to collaborate with strong people, even if you do not like them. And I see a possibility, as my colleague Omari said, of Raila Odinga saying, this young man, William Ruto, has proved himself. He has washed his hands. He can sit at the table and eat with grown-ups, you know? And there are these other people that have been trying to wash hands for many years. He's tried to wash Musalia Mudavadi's hands. Then there is the not so clear Wetangula. And then, of course, there is the other one. So there is a possibility, Sam, that Raila Odinga is going to do a reality check. He's going to ask himself this simple question. Will I have room to make kings or even to run for the presidency beyond 2022? The answer is going to be a big no. Why? Because even age will start catching up with Raila Odinga very seriously beyond 2022. At least we can see, God willing, that going into 2022, the good old man has some energy left and you can see that he can fight. So he's going to get to that realization where he says, I have lost many elections. I've lost many presidential elections. Should I lose my last presidential election? And I don't have to win the presidential election by being the presidential candidate myself.
Or being the ticket.
Or even being the ticket holder. I can change tact and win the election in a different manner. I could support William Ruto and we do a serious deal in which the only result is probably going to be winning the election and winning the election alone. So I think that going to 2022, I do not see that man going directly to be in the ballot. He is likely to coalesce around certain people. And I can bet the first choice is going to be William Ruto.
Because the scenario as it looks like, and this is slowly turning into now a political conversation, is that there is no way Raila will allow himself to be pushed off the political scene without a retirement plan.
Yeah.
So between now and 2022, basically he'll be looking at post-2022 and how he survives. But that given, let's look at this man, Kalonzo Musyoka, a little bit. Given events of the past all the way to what we saw sometime last week and over the weekend, how will history remember him politically? Because some of the issues that he cannot be forgiven for by ODM's staunch followers is the fact that when they needed him the most on the 30th, he wasn't there.
True, but the way he likes to recall it was that when the country needed him in 2007, he helped save this country from going down the brink. So he likes to remember
how
by
kupitia katikati yao.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes, by agreeing to Peter katikati. But I think even as we look at Kalonzo's future, we cannot ignore the 26th October elections and what it revealed, because much as I agree with Omari saying that it was a MasterCard for the deputy president to create this jubilee that has created the illusion that we have a party that has got national presence. 26th revealed what that is, that it is an illusion and nothing beyond that. So the question still remains where and who has the numbers and who can excite these numbers to be able to ensure support. So long as that question still remains valid, and remember that it was brought out in such a manner that it didn't need for you to be an analyst or to be engaging in the political electoral agenda for you to see that there really was something that people needed to address then. So long as that question still remains unaddressed, people have opportunity to be able to play around that agenda depending on how formations or alignments are developed. So that yet again, Kalonzo could just find himself with the right alignment and be able to present the right picture. I can see most of the people seated with me here looking very skeptical as I say that, but you never know. You never know.
I'm looking at you and wondering, really?
Yes.
Okay.
You never know. But for me, again, as has been said in this set, of course, the key players as we see now, and politics a day is too long, a lot can happen in a day, is Raila Amolo Odinga, who has shown people that there's illusion in politics and reality, and how do you support or protect what the reality presents vis-a-vis what the illusion presents. And we have this master player who can create a perfect illusion. Yes.
I'd like us to pay a bill or two, Omari. I'd like us to pay a bill or two, and then we'll be back to continue with this conversation and much, much more. Keep it right here. This is Eye on Politics, on the only way to start your day. Good morning, Kenya.
Eleza mahakama majina yao kamili.